I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. You know, Oregon loves being first in the nation to do something, and we certainly are that when it comes to decriminalizing small amounts of drugs. Love it or hate it, Measure 110 is the law of the land in Oregon right now. And a lot of you have very strong opinions on whether it's the greatest thing ever or that it's going to lead to the downfall of civilization as we know it. So we thought it'd be fascinating to see the results from a state audit, the very first one, looking at whether the law is meeting its intended goals: less arrests for drugs, more treatment for addicts. The results are surprising, and it's part of our big story. Auditors are fascinating people to me. They love detail and structure and rules. They're excellent at carefully poring through data and pointing out what rules were not followed and how things could be fixed. And in this first audit of Measure 110, the auditors found a mess. They basically said, we can't really tell if it's working or not, so let's just say it's too soon to tell. That's really part of the title. But when it comes to the initial rollout of Measure 110, they had plenty to say about that. Here's the audits director, Kip Mamont.
We got off to a rough start. Some of this government by ballot initiative causes some problems, and it takes time to structure government properly, which can be frustrating. But auditors, we talk a little bit wonky about controls and governance and outcome measures, but you really have to have those in place to assess performance.
Did you catch those words? Controls and governance and outcome measures. They may sound a little bit wonky, but they are the tools that let you measure whether something is working or not. And he's saying that Measure 110, it had none of that. And as a result, they have no idea whether it's working, whether anyone is being helped, or whether any money is being wasted. And remember, $302 million from marijuana tax money was diverted to Measure 110 to help people deal with their drug addiction. One of the findings in the audit found that early on, $33 million in access care grants were awarded to get programs up and running. But little to no data was collected by the Oregon Health Authority, and auditors were not able to determine if the grants were effective. In fact, there's no data on how the funds were even spent. No data on whether they improved access to drug treatment or other programs. Those grants were the first dollars to go to organizations that offered a variety of drug treatment options. But the auditors are saying there's just no way to know if that money actually helped people with drug issues or not. The auditors wrote that the OHA said many of the organizations were small and new to the state health system, and that forcing them to report how the money was spent would be unduly burdensome. The auditors also criticized OHA for being way too hands-off with a group of people not qualified to run the program that handed out hundreds of millions of dollars. It was supposed to be done in 9 months. Instead, it took 2 years. That group is called the Oversight and Accountability Council, or OAC, as it's called in the report. The auditors wrote most OAC members lacked experience in designing, evaluating, and administrating a governmental grant application process. They also wrote that left on their own, the OAC set up a system requiring 240 points of information for each application, along with questions that required long responses. And that all contributed to the delay in issuing funds statewide. Here's the audit manager, Ian Green.
The Oversight and Accountability Council had developed a request for grant application process, and that was overly complex. It had too many elements that needed to be evaluated, too many reviews that needed to take place before they could make those funding decisions. And they didn't have the staff support from the OHA to get to those, review them, make recommendations. So that's what led to months-long delays.
The auditors also found potential conflicts of interest among those on the oversight group that awarded the money, noting that on several occasions, OAC members referenced personal knowledge rather than materials in the grant applications when making funding decisions. The auditors note the instances did not meet a statutory definition of conflict of interest, but may violate procedures for what materials should be considered. The auditors also looked at the special phone line set up for Measure 110. Under the law, people found with users' amounts of drugs in public can be fined $100, but the fine is dropped if they call a special Measure 110 hotline to talk about their drug use. Our reporting found most drug users found that a joke and ignored it. and the auditors backed that up. They found that during the first 15 months, the special hotline, with an entire staff hired just for the hotline, by the way, that hotline had a total of 119 calls with a cost of over $7,000 per call. 27 of those people actually wanted help. Auditors found another existing drug and alcohol helpline took 10,000 calls during that same time period. Auditors also said they were surprised to learn that no Measure 110 money is going to help people with drug issues who are in prison. They called it a real missed opportunity. Auditor Ian Green visited the women's prison in Wilsonville called Coffee Creek.
We went there to see the alternative incarceration program, which is an intensive residential 24/7 drug treatment program for adults in custody. And it was just very surprising to see the level of support and the programs that are provided to those inmates. But what was surprising to me was how few of them got access to that treatment. We've got over 12,000 adults in custody at the Department of Corrections. Over 7,700 currently have significant substance use disorders, and only a few hundred each year are getting access to these intensive treatment programs.
That is surprising, and it's hard to imagine a more efficient setting for drug treatment. I mean, these folks are already being housed and fed, and they would likely be very motivated to take part. The auditors also point out that the biggest risk to Measure 110 is the lousy data collection and reporting that's going on right now. They warn that unless that improves, it's going to be impossible to ever tell if Measure 110 is effective. By the way, the Oregon Health Authority does have a new director. He put out a response to this audit, and believe me, there's a lot more to the audit. But basically he said, yeah, those are all good points, and we're going to get working on all of that right away. So I guess that's good. Now, here's my take on this, my opinion. Oregon Secretary of State Shemia Fagan and several others today repeated that title of the audit of too early to tell, as in too early to tell if Measure 110 is working. That is a title that only a politician would love. How about this? How about the rollout of Measure 110 is a disaster? Or maybe Measure 110, where did the money go? Or, well, I could go on, but you get the point. The Secretary of State made it clear today that she supports Measure 110 and talked of her mother and brother's struggles with addiction. I think it's admirable that she's open about that and passionate about getting addicts help. I also suspect that's why the audit title is a bit soft. Regardless, my main reaction after reading all of this was, oh, for crying out loud! How could the state, the Oregon Health Authority specifically, be so asleep at the switch on this? How could they be so hands-off to let a group of untrained citizens try to figure out how to dole out hundreds of millions of dollars in a brand new program? Why not get in there and help them? How is it that no one thought to gather important data that showed, I don't know, how many drug users are getting help in Oregon? How many were not? How many programs were available before Measure 110 began, so we could see if it's working now, 2 years later? And why does this matter? Because there are a lot of people in our area with drug addiction issues, a lot of people living on our streets, and a lot of people living in houses and apartments and condos as well, and they all deserve help. If you can't track where the money went or how it's being used, you won't know whether anyone is getting better or maybe just feeling a little bit more comfortable in their addiction, or maybe not even touched by the money at all. Remember, this is diverted marijuana tax. It's money that used to go to Oregon schools and mental health treatment and police. It should be put to good use, and we should be able to track it. So the rollout of 110 is a mess, and it should be frustrating to you whether you voted for it or against it. Once again, another big state agency is asleep on the job, and somebody should be held accountable. But I doubt that's going to happen. Let's just hope the new OHA director really does follow through and put structures and controls in place so that we'll at least get a better idea of what's happening when the next audit comes out in 2 years. Well, that's my opinion. What's yours? You don't have to agree with me. I might be full of it. I don't think so, but it is possible. Feel free to let me know. The email is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a message on our phone line, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. Coming up next on The Story, some coastal communities are upset that they're not included in Governor Tina Kotek's homeless state of emergency because they don't meet a certain threshold. But as our team found, the homeless crisis is not just an issue here in the metro. We'll hear from homeless folks in Seaside, as well as the response from the local government. We've also got a special behind-the-scenes look at how this story came together when The Story returns. Welcome back. Let's talk about the homeless crisis for a moment. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek recently declared a homeless state of emergency, but it was very specific when it comes to which communities it would affect. It was not a blanket policy for the entire state. And as Blair Best reports, coastal counties with growing homeless populations and little resources who did not meet the criteria for the state of emergency, well, they're protesting and asking now to be included.
Solidly for 3 years.
Since 2014, and I've been homeless ever since.
January 13th, 2016.
Time spent on the street is something one never forgets.
I'm getting too old for this. I'm 54 years old.
Linda is one of the many homeless people who has been struggling to survive in a small coastal town in Oregon for far too long.
It feels like they're wanting to brush us under the carpet, so to speak. Hide us. Put us where nobody can see us.
She spends her time picking up trash in this homeless camp in Seaside.
It's messy. I don't like seeing the garbage everywhere.
This hidden lot off the Oregon Coast Highway, surrounded by wildlife areas, is where the city allows homeless people to camp.
They have it so they're all in this one area. It's like a tent city. Yeah, Milpalm.
They don't want to give us any housing. They don't want to help us out. They could care less.
The city provides them one meal a day. Outreach workers like Isaiah O'Neill also frequent the site.
If you look around, you can see that there's people in need of services that aren't available.
For the past 8 years, Clatsop County has seen the highest rate of homelessness per capita in the entire state. The state as a whole has the 4th highest rate of unsheltered homelessness in the country.
We've really been left to our own devices, and we're doing all we can, doing our due diligence at least, to do what we can to combat it, but we need some assistance.
Assistance that Governor Tina Kotek is giving to other parts of the state through her homelessness state of emergency. It applies to areas where unsheltered homelessness has increased by 50% or more from 2017 to 2022. That breaks down to 5 major areas, including the Portland metro region and the Willamette Valley. Coastal communities like Clatsop County are not included.
We were disappointed to be kind of carved out of the governor's executive order.
Well, that's not right. He should declare it for the whole state, for every homeless person in the whole state.
The coast has the least resources of anybody.
She's talking about Seaside's lack of overnight shelters or warming centers, which all comes down to funding, something the city would get more of if they were included in the governor's state of emergency.
As far as like having a set place that they can rely on to be open every day, it's not there right now.
It's not just Seaside that has a homeless crisis and a lack of resources. Other coastal communities, like those in Lincoln County, are experiencing the same thing.
For a county our size, it's pretty deep-rooted.
Claire Hall is a commissioner in Lincoln County, where there's no overnight shelter and little affordable housing.
A lot of people are trying to survive on part-time, low-wage, seasonal jobs, mainly in the hospitality industry. So all of that has created really kind of a perfect storm of homelessness.
Lincoln County's Board of Commissioners sent a letter of appeal to Governor Kotek with the hope of being included in her homelessness state of emergency. She responded by saying, quote, "I want to assure you that I'm absolutely committed to addressing homelessness in every corner of our state. No single piece of legislation or executive order will be enough. It will take ongoing active partnerships with leaders across our state, and you have my commitment to be that partner."
Things that were happening in Portland 10 years ago, they're happening here now. And I think there's a real focus on action to try to do everything we can to alleviate this crisis.
Counties can ask to be included on this state of emergency by submitting a formal request to the Office of Emergency Management. The governor will then review those requests before making any changes. In Seaside, Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. As many of you story viewers know, Blair does a fantastic job not only covering the homeless crisis around the state, but also giving us a behind-the-scenes look at how her stories come together. This story obviously required a trip out west, but as you'll soon see, you don't necessarily find what you're looking for every step of the way.
All right, so we've arrived in Seaside. We're driving around trying to find people experiencing homelessness. It's not as in your face as, say, in more urban areas like Portland. You don't see a lot of tents on the sidewalk, even RVs really. We did find a homeless group hanging out outside Safeway. They were dropping off cans. We talked with them for a while and they told us that everyone camps in the woods here, right behind me at what's called Mill Ponds. They tell me you have to get a permit to have a tent there and that there's about 30 people in this large campsite behind me. So we're gonna go check it out. All right, so turns out that was the wrong location. We walked back into that camp and talked with a homeless guy there and he told us that that was private property. He said he didn't live at that campsite, but he told us where to go to find this larger campsite that the city allows homeless people to camp on. So we're headed there now. So we found the Mill Pond camp. It's right past these gates. It kind of spreads out into there. There typically is about 30 homeless tent sites set up. There was less than that today because a lot of them are moving their campsites due to the king tides that are coming this weekend. The king tides come and it floods this area, so they all have to move their stuff across the street. So there wasn't as many people camping here as there normally is. They have to have a permit to camp here. The city feeds them a meal once a day, but every Thursday they have to take all their things and move so that the city can come clean up the area, which is, really difficult for people here because they can't really get into a groove and they're constantly just waiting for the day that they have to, pack up their things and move on. Another thing that they told me is they feel like the city is just shutting them away and sort of hiding them back here behind the woods, which, you know, does kind of feel like that. There's, you know, gates, and it's hidden. It was hard for us to find, as you saw. So yeah, it's just interesting that this is where Seaside is putting a majority of their homeless campers. So when we got to this campsite, there was a group of people from this behavioral health center, and they're just very grassroots. 3 people, one of them's a nurse, and they go around and they just check in on homeless people. They're sort of like outreach workers, if you will. And they told me that, you know, some of the shelters around here don't have enough funding to open and function all year round. They only have, you know, about 90 days a year that they can open their doors. So they have to pick, you know, what time of year that they do that. So obviously they choose the, you know, hottest or the coldest nights of the years to open. So it's just, it doesn't feel like there's a reliable and stable functioning system here in Seaside for people experiencing homelessness. And it just begs the question, you know, why aren't they included on the governor's homelessness state of emergency when it feels like areas like this have the least amount of resources? All right, so we are back in the car now. We just shot our stand-ups out by the ocean and did a quick Zoom interview with the chair of the Clatsop County Commissioners. We're having a little snack in the car, and we're gonna head back to Portland and put this whole story together. Scotty, say goodbye.
Ah, yes, spent many a day with Scotty in the car. Nice job, both of you. Still to come on the story. We'll head out to Beaverton for a reunion for the record books. How a World War II veteran was able to reunite with those who went out of their way to help her a decade ago. It's an important lesson in gratitude from a member of the greatest generation, and a story that you don't want to miss. It's coming up next. This next story is about gratitude and the greatest generation, as they're called. This is 99-year-old retired Marine Sergeant Hattie Kelly. For the past decade, Hattie has been hoping to thank a group of people who helped her on a really tough day. But when she finally got her chance, the unexpected happened. Catherine Cook has our story.
It was 1943, the height of World War II. And 20-year-old Hattie Kelly's height,
I was 5'2".
secured her destiny.
I had to be a 5'2" to get in the Marines.
As one of the few and the proud.
It was World War II. Everybody was doing something, and that was the best I could do.
Sergeant Hattie Kelly served 2 years in the Marines as a recruiter, a rare sister among a band of brothers.
Became my family. It's been my family ever since.
Hattie is now 99 years old. Doctors tell her she may only have a few months left.
Who knows? It could be right in 5 minutes I could have a heart attack.
Clearly at peace with that, Hattie's focus now is expressing gratitude to family and friends, like fellow Marine Al Argadas.
Oh boy.
Does that work for you? She's one of our own.
In November, these friends and 65 others celebrated the Marine Corps' 247th birthday at the Stockpot Restaurant in Beaverton. Hattie was guest of honor. The Marines also invited Beaverton police to stop by, and so the stage was set for more expressions of gratitude.
So I asked if I could have the microphone for a minute so I could thank them.
And she started talking about this car accident in Beaverton, and everybody's kind of like, what's that got to do with the Marine Corps?
It was 10 years ago. Hattie was driving home from the grocery store, her van full of food. Then, around Southwest Hall in Sussex, she blew a tire.
Got one tree and one power pole, metal power pole. My car was, the front end was totally demolished.
Beaverton police arrived. So did an ambulance. And then it occurred to Hattie.
I said, well, I've got to get this food home.
That's when an officer stepped up.
And he says, well, where do you live? And I said, right down at the foot of this hill to the right. I'll take it home for you. Kindest thing that's ever been done to me. I mean, he didn't have to do that.
Hattie shared the whole story that night.
And I just thought, well, that was a good time to thank the police force. What happened 3 years ago, I've never had a chance to. And I heard somebody yell, oh my God. And he said, we were there.
It was Beaverton Police Lieutenant Ed Mastropolito, one of the officers who responded to Hattie's crash. And wouldn't you know it, he's also a Marine.
Everybody in the place erupted.
What are the chances of that? I mean, seriously, that was so unscripted and so spontaneous. It's something that we all felt, this has got a powerful message of looking after each other and acknowledging each other and being grateful.
The whole thing didn't really dawn on me until after I left.
Would you like to see those officers again?
Oh, I'd love to see them again.
A surprise house call.
Hi, boy.
From Beaverton Police Officer Ryan Garbett.
No resistance. No resistance. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
He remembers this place.
I'm putting groceries away after a crash.
I'm so glad I got to meet you, Ryan.
Officer Garbett is also a platoon sergeant in the Army Reserves. As for the Marine, Lieutenant Mastropolito is away on training.
Oh, hi. The other one I need to give a hug and a kiss. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a good guy. Your job is not an easy one.
You know, sometimes I think we forget that the little things we do really have an impact on the people we're fortunate enough to cross day to day.
Now they know. And more importantly,
good deeds go unrewarded. Not always.
Yeah.
Hattie knows that they know.
Once a Marine, always a Marine.
Once a Marine, always a Marine. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
In these eyes, a century's worth of gratitude. Just don't turn your back on them.
We can't all be Marines.
If you're in the Army.
Well, somebody's got to come rescue you.
And then turn around and run like hell.
In Beaverton, Catherine Cook, KGW News.
That's lovely. Keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. Well, that's the end of our show, but before we go, thanks for all your emails and voicemails on Measure 110. We've been watching them come in. You folks are fired up. Thanks for watching. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never really ends. I'll see you tomorrow.
This is KGW News.